Hello, this is Tom from anti-proton.com, and if you'll indulge me, I'd like to speak for just a minute about a couple of things. This is the part where you hit the button and then you stop what I'm doing and then you go click to the side on some other video. But hopefully you'll stay with me for just a minute and indulge me. I don't usually do this. I used to do it often, but I received many thumbs down from people as a result of it. But I wasn't necessarily so clear and collected. For example, I would often point out that I was tired from work and blah, blah, blah. So I decided to pick a time when I wasn't tired from work and I had plenty of caffeine and was in a reasonably good frame of mind for actually speaking. Those seem sort of like obvious things to do, but necessarily they're not always, especially when is tired. Of course, that was the whole point of it. So it's kind of a counterproductive, vicious little cycle. First up, this is just some informational things, and perhaps thought-provoking, maybe not. And do me a favor and actually listen to it if you are going to comment, be it good or bad, because why shouldn't you do that? First on my list, radioactive hotel rooms. I went to a radioactive hotel room not that long ago. I stayed there. I flipped on my Geiger counter. The whole room was, nice and hot. Not particularly dangerous by any means, but it was definitely radioactive. I broadcast to Radioactive.com because that was my ambient reading that I was around. I wasn't modifying the probe. I wasn't sticking it near radioactive material. It wasn't in a place that should be radioactive. If I were touring your uranium mine, for example, I wouldn't broadcast to Radioactive.com because that's not a normal or natural place for me to be. Well, for me, actually, it sort of is. But of all my peers, of people around me, that is not a place where normally people would be. The reason I kept that going in the hotel room is because that was a hotel room. It's a public hotel room. It's not public. It's actually private, but semi-public. It's called quasi-public. And so I did that. And, of course, I received lots and lots of goofy messages, people saying that, they were that this was the end of days and all the usual garbage that one gets, the stuff that happens these days as a result of the proliferation of knowledge and the act of attempting to see patterns in every little conceivable thing, because there must always be a snake under every single rock, which there is, of course, not always. Then, of course, after a while, I got sick to death of the goofy emails of the end of days, and I shut down my connection to RadiationNetwork.com, which was immediately then followed by articles stating that they shut him down, which I thought was kind of funny. Nobody shut me down. I actually clicked the little X on the program and closed it, but, whatever delusions people wish. I will go back to that hotel room probably in 2 days, which is Wednesday the 24th of whatever month this is, October. Yes. It's funny, I barely know what day it is. I'm spending all my time looking at harmonics and subharmonics and thinking about them and their differences with respect to waveforms of atoms and electrons. Excuse me, that's been something I've been thinking about recently. When I go back to the radioactive hotel room, I do plan to bring this. This is my Polymaster 1703 MO1B gamma spectroscopic dosimeter, having both a tiny Geiger counter built into it, which is funny, and also a cesium iodide thallium dope scintillation counter. I will actually be able to see not only how radioactive the room is listed in microsieverts per hour, which in this case is actually correct to use because this actually knows how much energy is hitting it. It's very few times one can use microsieverts per hour, and this is one of them. And additionally, I'll be able to connect to this and actually find out what's in the room that makes it radioactive, what isotopes exist in the room, such as potassium, which is a very likely suspect, or even something that shouldn't be in there. I mean, cobalt-60 or something. I doubt severely that anything like that is in that room, but just because I doubt it doesn't make it true or not true. Test proof is what will make it true or not true, which leads into something else I'd like to talk about in a minute. I will be visiting this hotel room very soon. But by the way, I have these headphones on, not because it makes me look like I'm a hardcore presenter talking about the traffic accident on route, blah, 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 but because with these I can listen to music, and I find that I can actually direct my thoughts better when I'm listening to music. It allows me to talk faster and be more, in swing with what I'm doing. I'd prefer to play the music, but then there's this nasty little thing called copyrights, and apparently I would then need to owe somebody money for something, and I don't want to do that. The next thing I'd like to point out is this. This is an RAP-47 thin crystal cesium iodide thallium dope scintillation probe. See, look, thin crystal. Oh, sorry, it's the thin crystals inside. Thin window, thin crystal. It's actually both. And this little device is made by SE International, and I just happened to get a hold of one of them. And it allows me to look at very, very low energy gammas and X-rays. As a result of this, I can perform something called X-ray emissions fluoroscopy, which is where you bombard an otherwise non-radioactive object with high-energy gamma rays, which I will do using my radioactive material, which I just happen to have lots of. And then when you see the X-rays that come back from the material, because it becomes energized, etc., and energy is quantified and so on, I can then measure those and actually know what's in it, which is amazingly interesting. For example, I could take my ring right here and find out, is it pure gold? What else is mixed in with this gold? And of course it is gold, but it's only, I think it's only 14 karat. So we'll find out what else is in it, although I could probably take a guess as to what's in it. But anyhow, that will be coming up as well soon. And I haven't made a lot of videos recently because I've been very, very busy with my projects and so on at work. It's very, very tiring. I do a lot of programming and so on, which is... I really should get into some debates sometimes about programming, something where I don't have to throw out the disclaimer of not being, an expert and not having any technical, professional experience or schooling in the subject. Because obviously, with programs, being a computer scientist, I can say, oh hell yeah, I actually do have a degree in the subject, and that actually is what I talk about. But for some reason, I don't seem to talk about that. I guess I leave work at work, which is kind of amusing. By the way, if you see these little papers, I see them in the video because I can see them. It's kind of amusing here. This is sort of backwards, isn't it? See these little things on my wall here? Well, these. Just to let you know, those are not diplomas. I don't want to have anybody get the mistaken belief that those are somehow some kind of diplomas. Those are actually just little funny certificates that I got from United Nuclear when I bought my uranium samples. So no false illusions of anything whatsoever. My diploma is actually on the other side of the wall. So anyhow... next up on the list, book. I'm working on the final proof of my book. It's taken, God, now 10, 15 years of time and research to finish writing this book. And I hope that it will be finished and ready for publishing this December in time for various holidays that occur at that period of time. Christmas, Hanukkah, Yule. There's a Muslim holiday. I do apologize, Muslims, but I forgot your holiday. But you have one that happens at that time, too, and I can't remember what the hell it is. But anyway, regardless, everybody has a holiday at that time period for sort of obvious astronomical. The book is coming along nicely. It's about 90,000 words. It's actually done. I shouldn't say it's coming along nicely. The finishing up of it, where I run through it the very last time, make sure I spelled words correctly. God, I get killed by homonyms, just blown by homonyms. Like I saw the saw sawing, that sort of thing. Well, that's not really a homonym, is it? Well, it is, but it's not spelled differently. But anyhow, regardless. And we'll see what happens with that, too, and I'll post pieces of it very soon for people to look at and see if you're interested. It occurs in the transient period between the Mesolithic period and the Neolithic period, which is about 5,500 BC or so, if you happen to live in Europe, of course, because the time changes with respect to the part of the world you live in, for example. Next up, and this is a very important thing I wanted to bring up. Let's see, how long have I yapped? Well, doesn't say. Yes, it does. 8 minutes, 14 seconds, give or take, something like that. I wanted to talk about logic and fact. I've had a lot of people zap me and argue and go at me recently, mostly ad hominem attacks, but some of them are reasonably correct. And often these are the result of people misunderstanding logic, fact, positions, beliefs, etc. Often I have attacked things that I don't find to be realistic. For example, chemtrails and what's that other one? HARP. Now, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, oh God, please don't fill the comment thing up here with messages telling me that I do need to believe or not believe in these subjects. I could care the less. They have nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But their category of thing is what I'm talking about, not them individually. If you believe something is true, let's say you believe something it has or has not happened, and this is extraordinary of common belief or known fact, then it is upon you, the believer, you have the burden of proof. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing. But that's the way it is. For example, recently I did an experiment where I attempted to transmutate aluminum-27 into phosphorus-30. Well, phosphorus-30 doesn't just normally appear. It's not a very commonplace thing. And so creating it, even though this experiment's been done many times before, but regardless of that fact, it was upon me, the claimant, to prove that I did it. which I think I did. I mean, I took a lot of data, showed all my evidence and everything, showed the captures at the right energy where the energy should be in the gamma spectrum for that particular isotope. And you can argue and debate left and right as to whether I actually did or not, and that's perfectly fine. That's the whole point of science. But if I told you that I created phosphorus 30 using that particular method of particle bombardment, it is not your job to disprove me or even to prove me correct, though you have every right to do so. And by the way, my phosphorus 30 experiment has nothing to do with this. I'm using it as an example. Actually, nobody attacked it. Everybody thought it was a cool experiment. But regardless, let's say somebody did. When you have something that you believe that is extraordinary, and that does not mean that impossible or crazy or whatever. It doesn't have to be the Loch Ness Monster. It just has to be beyond the normal, hyper normal, against what people believe, even if we all believe it's wrong. For example, if the world is flat, if the world is circular, but we all believe it's flat, and everybody thinks the world is flat, everyone at all, but then you stand up and you say, I believe the world is round. Now you're the one making the extraordinary claim. And you might say, oh, well, we now know the world is obviously round. But for the time, we did not. And so it was an extraordinary claim that had to be proved. And that's the nature of the way science works. So please understand that. I get a lot of criticism when I say something like, prove it. People say, oh, well, you have to go look at the facts. No, I don't. I don't have to look at any facts because I'm not the one making the claim. And when I do make the claim, you better be sure that I have to look at the facts because now it is upon me to make them. And one must also do one other part, which is to separate colloquial never said a word right, colloquial, regular affairs, things that are happening normally, like, how do I put this in a better sort of way? Standing around the water cooler talking to one another. Those sorts of discussions need to be separated from proper scientific debate. For example, if I postulate that something is or is not true and write a little paper and all this other stuff and spit it on out there, in that format, in that context, I have to be accurate and I have to make claims and then support them. But if I'm standing with you on the street drinking a coffee and I say, you know what, I think that most of this likes Coke versus Pepsi. And you might say, oh yeah, well, what proof do you have? I don't know. I usually see people with more Coke than Pepsi. For that kind of a mundane little discussion, it's not necessarily required that I have, 15 cited resources. It'd be nice if I did. It would make me look better, but it does not necessarily have to occur. So when we chat with one another in places like YouTube, that's the sort of discussion you're going to get. You're not going to get people that have every little piece of material backed up and ready to rock and roll. But if you post a video where you make a claim something is or is not the truth, that's a different issue. At that point, you're putting forward something that has to actually be proven. Remember, when you see something that is unexplained, you might start by making suppositions. Suppose this might have done it. Perhaps this is the reason it did it. And you test them. When you find a set of suppositions that are very likely, that agree with the facts being things that you can quantifiably discern. A fact, by the way, is not an explanation of something. It is the observed occurrence of something. Then you would form a hypothesis. Let's say that I take something and drop it and it falls. I might suppose that a magical hand grabs it and pulls it down. I might suppose that magnetic fields pull it down. I might suppose that up is down and down is up. Who knows? But as I sit down and look at it and realize that there's mass and so on, I might come up with the hypothesis of gravity. The fact is that the rock fell. The object in my hand, whatever it fell. That is a fact. And in no way does a fact explain itself, unless it is a self-evident fact, and there are very few self-evident facts, let me tell you. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Using my hypothesis, I might then spend days, years, months, seconds, hours, millennia, testing it over and over until I formulate something called a theory. A theory is the greatest possible thing I can come up with in science. Because a theory says gravity exists and it has these intrinsic properties and these set of characteristics. And using these characteristics and properties and so on, I can feed in new variables. Let's say what happens if I drop 10 rocks. And I can spit out an outcome of what should happen. And then I can go test it and verifiably see that it works. It's called falsibility. And so with a theory, I can then create more facts from that theory. Theories are not facts of themselves. Facts are not theories. And the burden of proof is on the person who theorizes, who supposes. but that is not to be confused with water cooler supposition. Now, two last things to bring up. Radiation phobia. I think this is sort of an interesting one. I keep bumping into this. I don't consider myself a radiation phobic person. Yeah, radiation phobic person. For example, I'm holding 37 kilobecquerels of cesium-137 in my hand right this moment. I wouldn't suggest duct taping this to my head, gluing it on or something, swallowing it, things like that. That would be what's called a bad idea. And as far as evolution is concerned, you would then not evolve. Yeah. But basically put, I also don't agree with the concept of bathing myself in it. So I'm somewhere in between. I find it very amusing. If you consider radiation to be something that is dangerous, but not the end of the entire existence of everything, you get attacked for that. Likewise, if you don't just cover yourself in it, you get attacked for that too. It's kind of hard to be a moderate when everybody's so polarized. Just a little bit of a thought for you there. And let me just state before I get the people attacking me back in this, because everything's always attack, attack, attack. At no time did I ever state what was or was not a safe limit. Although I have personally many times stated my opinion of what I for myself consider to be a safe limit. Do you understand the difference between an opinion, a fact, a theory, and a supposition? But regardless. And last thing to point out is Bionerd23 and her visit to Chernobyl. Absolutely fascinated, and I wanted to point it out. It is absolutely the neatest thing. I would never go to Chernobyl. There's not enough in me. I don't have the right, well, let's just say I don't have large enough guts to do it. Which is sort of ironic when you really think about it, isn't it? Bionerd23 actually went there recently, and she's been uploading videos, and I think they're absolutely amazing. I'm not sure I agree with the idea of traipsing around Chernobyl, but I respect her right to go do it, and I think it's actually quite interesting. You should take a look at it. I'll see if I can put a link to it at the bottom of this so everybody can take a peek and see. So hopefully you've suffered through my indulgence here of 17 minutes and something odd seconds, probably 18 by the time I'm done, of me yapping about things, and hopefully this hasn't been too much of a trouble for you. And there you go. Oh, and to all the people whom I've recently offended with some of my comments, I need you just to understand one thing. And no, you don't have to understand that. What right do I have to tell you what you need to understand? You don't need to understand anything. You understand whatever you want. But let me be more polite, at least, and state that you have a right to your opinion. And if you don't agree with what I'm saying and you wish to unsubscribe to me, as several people had, that's fine. And I absolutely agree with your right to do that, because you have a right to your own opinions. Now, if you make a claim, you must support it. If you have an opinion, that does not necessarily require support, because it is an opinion. So, there you go. This has been Tom from anti-proton.com. And remember, think there's not a snake under every single rock. But some rocks do have snakes. Bye-bye.